Hello everyone, my name is Abby and I'm the Young Adult Assistant at the Twin Lakes Library System and I use she, her pronouns. So for today for Slice of Life, I'm going to be talking to you about a couple of YA books that are Shakespeare retellings. So I think I did a book talk about books that are retellings a little while ago, but this one is simply going to focus on works that are influenced by Shakespeare works. So I'm not the biggest Shakespeare fan actually, but there are a couple plays that I like, and also I tend to like the storylines more when they're retold. I just don't like reading plays. How about that? So I have two books to talk to you about today, and I enjoyed both of these books so much that I'm so excited to talk about them. I think you'll all enjoy them as well, and yeah, let's get started. So the first book I have is Val Is Fair, and that's what it looks like for the audiobook, and that's by Hannah Capin, and it's a hoopla audiobook, and it's recommended on Common Sense Media for ages 14 and up. Personally, I actually think the content's a little bit more intense, so I would say 15 or 16, just because there's lots of talk of sexual assault and I think it's like mental health issues and suicide attempts, so a lot of really intense topics. So I would say 15 or 16, honestly, but of course that is up to your discretion. So this book follows four girls. Yes, four girls. So we have Elle, who is our main character, and her friends Mads, Jenny, and Summer. And they're just kind of like the it girls of their school. Like, they are just super cool. They don't care what anyone has to say about them. They're very in their circle, and everyone wants to be them, essentially. And so one night, they are going to a party for Elle's Sweet 16. So they crash another school's party, the St. Andrew's Prep Party. And a group of boys target Elle at this party and they sexually assault her. And so Elle wants revenge for what's been done to her, and her friends want to help her get revenge. So she transfers to St. Andrew's Prep, kind of changes her appearance, and she plans to destroy all of the boys who were a part of assaulting her. She plans on having them kill each other, is essentially what she's trying to do. So she joins their group, and she manipulates this boy named Mac, and, gets him to do all of her bidding for her, essentially. And yeah, it's just a really dark revenge thriller that happens, and it's very intense. Like I said, a lot of content warning just for where, but basically Elle infiltrates this school and she manipulates everyone around her into adding her to their group, and they sort of are unprepared for what she's going to do. So in case it was not clear, this is a Macbeth retelling, but you essentially follow Lady Macbeth, who is Elle. Macbeth is also my favorite Shakespeare work. It's like one of the two Shakespeare plays I really, really like. But Macbeth is a great play, and it is a great revenge story. I think this book does a phenomenal job at being a really great and compelling revenge story. So, what I loved about it is very fast-paced. So I listened to the audio in probably 2 days. Let me double check. I can check for it right now because I reviewed it on Goodreads. I'm pretty sure it took me 2 days to listen to this audiobook, though. Let's see. 3 days, excuse me. It took me 3 days to finish this book, but it's also like an 11-hour audiobook, so that's pretty impressive. Yeah, I just never wanted to stop listening to it. I play games on my phone and just sit and listen to the audiobook, and part of that was because I found the narration to be super strong. Hannah Capin, who writes it, has a very interesting writing style, and I don't know if I would have enjoyed it as much if I had physically read it. I actually had a friend who read this book physically and loved it still, so it's possible, but I felt like the narration really captured the writing style very well and did a fantastic job at like making it compelling and making it sound very poetic and lyrical and almost like you were listening to a Shakespeare work. So I really just wanted to shout out the narrator there. I think it really enhanced the story. And like I said, it is a Macbeth retelling. You can see the influences of the original story. She definitely made it clear that it was a Macbeth retelling. But it stands on its own. Like, it sort of finds its own footing and makes it a more modern retelling in a really strong way. This book is also very feminist. Basically, Elle is reclaiming herself and her power after what has happened to her. She is reasserting herself as a strong girl and not to be thought of in a certain way. She doesn't want people to think of her a certain way. She doesn't want people to think that she's powerless. She knows she's powerful, and that's her goal, is to make sure that that stays strong. And so it's really interesting feminist perspective on it. Lady Macbeth is such a cool character, and I thought that Elle was just a great modern example of her, and I loved seeing it, so I liked that. But on the flip side, no person in this book is a good person. Like, Elle is actively committing murder. Like, she's convincing people to kill each other. It's very dark, and like I said, no one's a good person. You don't really like... I think Elle is compelling, but I wouldn't say she's a good person, so like all the characters are sort of unlikable. But I liked that. Like, I'm glad that she made it like that, because in Macbeth, no one's supposed to be a really likable character. Like, they're all very complex characters. So I kind of appreciated seeing that. And yeah, like, I just enjoyed that aspect of the story, and I really didn't mind the fact that everyone was kind of awful on the side that you're supposed to be rooting for. I don't care about the boys. They were all horrible. I'm not sad about what happened to them. But the girls, like Elle and her friends, like, they're bad people, but they're amazing in how they're dealing with all of this and stuff. So yeah. And then I think the last thing about it is just that it's incredibly memorable. I have like not stopped thinking about it since I read it. Simply every time I'm like sitting here, I'm like, wow, Val Is Fair is such a good it's such a good book. I loved it so much. And I will be thinking about it for forever, and I'm glad I read it, and I definitely think everyone should read it. Yeah, so the next book this is probably going to be my favorite book of the year, just heads up, and that is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. So actually, I read the physical copy we have in the library, because it's available on Hoopla in the audiobook form, and then we have the book in our physical collection. I read this from our physical collection, and I went and bought a copy for myself because I loved it so much. So, yeah. Also, the cover, I think, is just really pretty. Not that that matters. But, this is by Chloe Gong, by the way, and Common Sense Media recommends it for ages 14 and up, and I think that's good. Yes, so in this book, we are in the year of 1926, and we're in Shanghai. And so Shanghai in this world is full of debauchery. There's a blood feud between two gangs that are, kind of in power over all of Shanghai, essentially. And the city just kind of has to deal with it. Like, if you're not in the gang, then you just kind of have to deal with it. But specifically, it follows 18-year-old Juliet Tsai, I think is how you say it. And she's a former flapper, and she has returned to her role as she was in America, and she's come back to Shanghai, and she's returned to her role as the heir of the Scarlet Gang, which is, a very big crime gang in Shanghai. And they have the rivals who are the White Flowers, and they've been kind of at each other's throats for generations. And in that gang, we have the heir, who is Roma Montego, I think is how you say it. And he and Juliet were in love, but then he betrayed her. So they're not in love, which is explained in the story. But, they're kind of just going about their business, kind of hating each other. But then gangsters on both the sides sort of start to develop this instability and start clawing out their own throats. This book is very graphic sometimes, by the way, just to warn you. And so everyone's starting to freak out because there are people like tearing out their own throats. And so there's an illness spreading, like a madness. And there's also a monster. And so, a lot of people are starting to die. And so Juliet and Roma don't want the people in their gangs to die. So they decide to kind of set everything aside and work together and take care of everything, because if they don't, no one's going to be left. So there won't be anyone to rule. So, yeah, there's a lot happening in this book. I promise it's all tied together better than I just explained it, but I just get overwhelmed every time I think of this book. I think when I reviewed it on Goodreads, I just put in all caps, just because I was mind blown. I thought it was amazing. But this is actually a debut novel too, which is how are people writing this good in their first books? I don't know. Anyways, it's impressive. But yeah, so what I loved about it, I loved everything about it, but to break it down, the writing is so, like Hannah Capin's, it's lyrical in a different way, but it's lyrical, and I just really loved it. Chloe Gong does such an amazing job. This is also a Romeo and Juliet retelling, in case you couldn't tell, which is one of my least favorite Shakespeare works, actually, but somehow I managed to love it in this book. I thought it was amazing. Yes, so the writing is super strong. I think that the world is really well explained through the writing, and the tension between the characters is really well written and explained, and I enjoyed it so much. And to kind of go along with that, the character dynamics. So there's a lot of history between all the characters, and all of the characters have their own history. Even the side characters, you sort of get the perspective of. So who do we have? We have Kathleen, who is a great side character, and also I believe she's trans, so great representation too is really good. Who else? We have Marshall and Benedict, who are on Roma's side. Kathleen's on Juliet's side. She's her cousin. So that was really cool. They were all really fleshed out. They weren't just flat side characters. They all were developed really well in the story, and I'm sure the next book they'll be even more fleshed out. So that was cool. And the tension between Roma and Juliet, you sort of know their history gets explained through the book, but it's just there's so much tension between the two of them, and then when they finally sort of address things, it combusts. Made me like Romeo and Juliet. This is the Romeo and Juliet I think schools should teach now. This one, not the Shakespeare one. This is better than the Shakespeare one. Which, as an English major, I'd get in trouble for saying, but this is better. This is just a better work. I'm sorry. I loved it. There's a lot of amazing representation. Roma is, I believe, Russian, and Juliet is, she's of Chinese descent. It was really cool to see a large cast that is not Western America. I felt this was really action-packed, and it was political, and there was a good balance of the two of them. And it made for a really compelling story. I was never bored reading this. It took me a little longer to read this one just because it's a little bigger than Val Is Fair. This one's 400 something pages. Val Is Fair is right under 400 pages. But it's not because I was bored reading it. I couldn't put it down a lot of the time. I was going to watch a movie at a friend's house, and I asked her before we start if I could finish the last 40 pages of the book, because I really needed to know how it ended, and she let me, which was nice, so I finished it. But yeah, she was great. But that was really cool. That just shows you how much I wanted to read it. Enemies to lovers, which I've said multiple times, is my favorite relationship trope, because Roma and Juliet hate each other. They hate each other. They want to kill each other. But there's a lot of tension because they used to be in love, and so yeah, it's just so well done. I loved it. The characters are also super morally gray, so if you enjoyed Six of Crows and the character dynamics in Six of Crows, I think you would really like this book, because I feel it's a similar vibe in that they're in a gang and they're not good people, but they're fun to follow and you really like them as characters. So I really recommend this book, especially if you're a Six of Crows fan, which they're making a TV show, so watch that. But anyways, but yeah, I really like a good morally gray character, and I feel like just like in Val Is Fair, these people are super morally gray. Yeah, wow. I'm just getting excited thinking about it. I would reread this book again. I might actually re-listen to the audiobook because I'm curious to see what that sounds like. Anyways, there is a cliffhanger also at the end of this book that has you like dying from the next book. I don't know when the next book is coming out. I'm desperate for it. I want the sequel so bad. I would pay a lot of money to read the next book sooner than it would come out, but that's probably not gonna happen. Anyways, so I think the cliffhanger is really well done in this, in a way that really, I'm not even like angry that there's a cliffhanger, because sometimes I feel like I'm angry when there's a cliffhanger. I'm just like, wow, I really need the next book, so I know it's gonna happen. And then the last thing is I feel like this book talks about a lot of important issues. Like colonization is a theme that gets talked about, and like the erasure of culture, and assimilation, and like identity, because especially with Juliet, because she lived in America for I think it was 4 years, and she's from Shanghai, but she lived in America when she was young too, so she's like having an identity crisis where she doesn't feel like she's enough Shanghai or enough, but she doesn't feel enough American, and so there's just like, it's a very complex feeling she has, and I think that was really well explored. And again, colonization, there's a lot of talk about, the British and the Americans coming to Shanghai and sort of twisting the image and changing things about it. And it was just a lot of really good discussions happening there. So yeah, so those are the 2 books that I had to talk to you about today. My slice of life will also be about Shakespeare Retellings, but in film form, so that's exciting. So I will talk to you all again later.